Jesus music, yeah. Jesus music, yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Girl Time Podcast. I am your host, Anisha Huggins, and this is episode 15, part 2 of Art of Communication. In part 1 of this conversation, you got to meet my husband, Jared Huggins, and understand communication in our marriage and how it has grown and will continue to grow over the years. So today, I got the ladies in the room, and I'm really excited because joining me is two incredible women. So help me welcome Kizmin-Jones.
Hello.
And I also have Sylvia Hudson.
Hello.
I'm going to start with the first question. So, Kizmin, how long have you been married?
I have been married 21 and a half years. It'll be 22 years in August.
Awesome. And Sylvia?
I have been married 21 and a half years as well.
Oh,
It'll
that's
be
awesome.
22 in July.
Look at that.
Oh, look at that. So, did y'all know that y'all was married around the same time?
I did not.
I didn't know.
What is your definition of effective communication?
My definition of effective communication, I would say it would be give and take from both of us.
Right.
Like listening on my part and my husband receiving what I'm saying at the
Right.
same time.
Right.
So that's really it for me. Just listening, both of us conversating back and forth about whatever the subject is for me.
Me and my husband have this little saying. We've been doing this for some years now. I know you hear me, but are you listening to me? And to me, the difference between those two is, you could be sitting watching TV and hear somebody, like
Yeah.
Charlie Brown, wah, wah, wah.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is the communication part is, okay, you're receiving it, and you're receiving it how I intended to send it to you.
Right.
Because we filter stuff so much, with our own situations, our own experiences. And so if I say something to you and you receive it, but you receive it not how I intended it to go, then that wasn't effective communication. Effective communication is I sent it to you this way and you received it this way.
Right.
And you have to talk back and forth to make sure that what you sent out is received appropriately.
And I had this conversation with Jared, and he kind of said something similar to what both of you guys said. But one of the things that we kind of gave it an example, and example was my work schedule, because it's very complicated and it's hard for me to explain for him to understand. And so we spent like maybe 2 minutes having that conversation about like how he perceived what I said. So can you guys give kind of like an example of when there was a time when you like really, really had to say, hey, are you listening to me and are you understanding? Just to make sure that they understand what you said.
I feel like for me, so in my business right now, every week, Ken and I, hopefully most of the time it's before Sunday, we try to figure out, what our tithes and offering is, right? And so for me, like I handle all of my payroll, and so I tell him what I made for the week. And so we were trying to figure out this morning what my portion was, okay? And so I told him it was XYZ. And then he was like, was that up or down from last week? And I said, well, it just depends on how you look at it. Like, is it up? Is it down? Whatever.
Right.
And so then we kind of started having words about that, because he was saying, well, if you did how many new clients last week and then how many new clients this week? And then I just had to pause and say, are you listening? Repeat after me. Like, it's this, it's that, like really, are you really listening, or are you just, waiting for the next response, or, what he's going to say to what I'm going to say. And so I feel like for us, it's both of us like honing in on what the other person is saying, not just waiting for the response to it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
So did he understand after you explained it to him?
He did.
Okay.
He did. But my husband, he's more XYZ, like boom, boom, boom. And I'm just, I'm a little bit more laid back. And so, yeah, but he got it.
I don't know if I can have a specific example, but I know recently we have had so much on our plate that I noticed that things are getting lost in translation.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had this, every marriage, 20-some years, you're going to have,
Right.
I don't know how many of these times, right? So
Right.
I've been here before, but just different circumstances. And when we work so crazy and his work schedule is nuts, our time that we talk is shortened. And I find myself having to cram all this stuff in that time.
Yeah.
And then a week goes down the line, and I'm getting ready to do whatever I said I was going to do last week. And he said, "You didn't tell me that." "Yes, I did." "No, you didn't." "Yes, I did." "Okay." I have to put it in the context of why, so he can remember.
Yeah.
And I said, we really need to pause, because we don't have that time to just stop and say, let's have this conversation.
Yeah.
When you're going to work at 4 a.m. and you're not coming back till 8 p.m. and you're exhausted, we're getting moments in between meetings, and that his moment in between a meeting might be mine in the middle of a meeting, and my out of a meeting at lunchtime might be his, something crazy. So we're finding that every time we shift, every time there's a shift in our life, our surroundings, whatever it is, our kids getting a certain age or whatever, we see a shift in our marriage.
Yeah.
And you got to keep up. And it takes, it's like running a railroad, 150 miles an hour and then trying to whip a curve, like you're trying to make sure you stay on the track, right?
Yes.
Because this stuff is hard to keep up with, and life doesn't stop for you, Everything crazy at work is not stopping because you just need to pause. I mean, that's been a little tricky to just make sure that we're and the older we get, we're remembering what we said. I used to want to tape that stuff because I'm like, I'm gonna tape it now because you're gonna be like, I didn't say that, or want to renege on it. Now I'm like, I need to tape it just so you remember that you did hear it. That I really did say this to you. I joke, but that's important. That's something that you really have to continue to work on and tweak as you go along.
Yeah. That's good. In the beginning of your marriage, was it hard to communicate with your spouse? Because I know with me, and I give you an example, I know with me, I really don't say everything that I feel. And so Jared is totally opposite, and he's just, I need to understand what you're feeling. I need you to talk about this. We're not going to move to the next point unless you talk about this. So has there ever been a power struggle in the beginning compared to now?
So my husband and I met when he was actually overseas. Well, we kind of knew each other a little bit, but most of our early part of our relationship was communicated via letter or a call a week. And so most of our first part of our relationship was only communication and not face-to-face. We didn't have FaceTime or internet or none of that to use at the time. So it was like we tried to pack in as much time as we could, as much information as we could in those times. And so we really based our relationship on communication, which was great. But when we actually got married, there's other topics that you don't really get into when you're dating that you get into when you're married. And I, to be honest, didn't learn how to communicate like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
My family did not talk about certain things. We just didn't, period. That's not how I was raised.
Yeah.
I don't know what, this stuff has got to be talked to about something. But, I'm just clueless. I'm looking around hoping somebody's going to tell me something,
Yeah.
And so my husband was like your husband, very diligent about, no, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I want you to say exactly what's on your mind. And that was really hard for me because I was not used to doing that.
Yeah.
And that he still has to remind me. You need to, not necessarily what's on your mind, but let's get to the root of it.
Right.
Let's say what's on my mind now. But
Right.
let's get to the root of it, because sometimes you're skating around it. You're saying all this stuff that's not really what is really bothering you.
Yeah.
I would say the same. In the beginning, I'm a very people-pleasing kind of person. And so early on in our marriage is pretty much me, everything was yes or whatever you want or however you want it. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter to me, kind
Yeah.
of. But really, it did. But I'm not the type of person to even say so. So, yeah, that's what it looked like. Fast forward to now, I'm more vocal in terms of what I want and how I feel about a certain thing. But, you know, sometimes I still have those struggles.
Yeah.
You know, it comes up, but I think I handle it better now in communicating.
That's good. That's good. So, Kid, you talked about when he was away during military, and you guys writing letters and communicating in that way. So, how did you guys get through that?
Very carefully. But it was an interesting time because we kind of forged this relationship not around anybody else. It was kind of cool because you had this kind of to yourself. But on the flip side of that, there were other people interested in him at the time. And so my mother had told me, you need to keep this to yourself until he comes back because it's not time to just be flaunting what you got and nobody knows. No, he's not here to defend it, you know? And I'm like, ooh, I didn't think about that, you know? So it's kind of like weird, you know? You can tell your friends and it didn't feel like you should at the time. And we're kind of talking and stuff and I didn't expect it.
Right.
I didn't expect our relationship to turn into a relationship. I was feeling like, oh, this soldier is in this war-torn area by himself. I'm going to send him, like, church books and stuff, you know, like, to kind of pick his spirits up. Like, that was my thought process to that. And that just kind of blossomed into something else. And so, you know, once he came home for a break, he was here for a week, and then we went on an official date. Then everything kind of like, ooh, okay, you know, this is going to go somewhere else that I wasn't expecting. And then we had to do that for like 4 or 5 months. So
That's cool.
yeah, it was fast, and it was a little uncomfortable because I wasn't used to that. And I expected fairy tale, what you see on TV, you know, which is dumb. But this is what we see, right? We see all this, oh, butterflies, and I didn't have that. And I didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, is this real or is it real because I don't feel that? You know, because butterflies are probably dumb because they're going to go away and then you're going to be like, oh, I don't like you anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think that's what I came down to the conclusion. That was probably a good thing that I didn't feel, you know, super like, oh, I'm floating through the air and all this. And because it was a real relationship.
Yes.
It wasn't this fairy tale what I thought it should be. And so I didn't have any doubts or regrets or anything.
Yeah.
When I, you know, my wedding day, are you nervous? I said, not really. And everybody's looking at me like I'm weird. I know what you know, this is what I want. You know, I'm not guessing. I'm not struggling with that. I'm not, oh, what if this guy comes out to be something else? I didn't feel that way. So
That's good. And I only asked because Jared and I went through that for 6 months when he was away. And he was away the first 3 months, and I was going through it, and I didn't understand it because, okay, I can write letters, and that's how we communicate with each other, but I didn't have him here. And so usually that was very different for me. So how has communication changed in your marriage over the years? Do you, like, in ways of improvement? Because for me, we still working on that. And I know like we only 3 years, so we have nothing on y'all. Nothing at all. So we're still improving on me not shutting down and him not really overpowering, but just continuing to talk when I'm trying to get my thoughts together. So we're still working in the sauce.
that's not going to just change. I mean, 20 years, 22, 30, whatever the number is, remember, you're also changing.
Right.
It's evolving.
Right.
So I'm not 22.
Yeah.
I'm not in college all giggly and welcome to the world. No,
Right.
I've had kids. I've had depression. I've had lost jobs. We've had, you know, lost parents. This is life.
Yes.
And life changes you over time. And so your communication, you may not have so many blow-ups, like where you're just, I said I didn't like this, blah, blah, blah. But it's still, he's trying to figure me out still.
Yeah,
Correct.
Still, yeah.
And I told him, I said, no, I'm going to tell you right now. What I like today, I am not going to like tomorrow, so just get over it. I can't even figure it out, so you might as well quit trying.
Oh, Lord. Yes. Yes.
So trying to just growing in my own skin
Mm-hmm.
is a big deal, and I think he knew more of who he was. And he was 6 years older than me, so he had experienced the world. He had gone overseas. He had done all this stuff. He had kind of grown into himself more than I had at the time. That took me a minute, and I didn't really have much time to think about it because I had a kid, then I had another kid. So you don't have much time to be like, who am I?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm somebody's mom. Oh, then I'm another person's mom, and oh my gosh, now I'm working 2 jobs and 2 kids, and you know, it's just I didn't have time to pause and find out who I really was, and so that was some growing pains, and that made me want to shut down and made me not really want to talk about it, and made him have to pry, and had some tears, and things that aren't fun and fuzzy and warm, and things that you have to just keep pushing through, because even though it's not wonderful, that you're in it for the long haul no matter what. And that's those moments where you have to say, okay, this is not working how we want it to be, but it doesn't matter, because we're going to get through that, and we're going to push past this, and it's going to change for the better. You just have to hold on.
Yeah. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work.
Yeah. I don't think that work just stops because you hit to a milestone.
It doesn't. I feel like our methods change. Like our methods of communication changes as, the longer you're married, it just changes. I feel like for myself, early on when Ken and I would disagree about things, I would shut down. And so then to communicate with him, I would write it down. It would just be notes back and forth because I communicated better if I didn't have to say it to him, because I couldn't say it to his face, but I could write down. I could write it down. I couldn't tell him exactly what I was feeling in the moment, but I can get it all down on paper. And so that worked for me. Now, fast forward to now, I kind of laugh at it, but I'm like, it worked.
It worked. Yeah.
It worked for me then. And even now, I sometimes will write something on a sticky note and just put it on his pillow. Because, I didn't tell you this morning. But you're going to see this, You're going to see it later. Just how I felt about that. So,
yes.
I need to steal that. I love sticky notes.
Yeah, Jared will ball it up. Be like, no, you tell me this.
I think my husband's he is so, I won't say type A, but kind of, he's a business guy. He's to the point. He's very direct. He's got that military sense about him, and he wants to sit down here and hash it out right now,
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. And before I would just be like, trying to kind of hem and haw around it. Now I'm just like, you know what? You need to just give me a minute. Go over there, and I'm gonna go over here, and it might be more than a minute, because I don't know exactly how I feel. And you're not gonna pressure. I feel pressured into giving us something at the moment, which might not be as accurate as it needs to be. I need to analyze this stuff, and I need to analyze it so I stay in love.
That's good.
Because if I say something,
that is so good.
My mother taught me, the best advice my mother ever taught me is, when you're upset, just close your mouth and just stop for a minute, and just pause before you say anything. And it, first I thought that seems kind of weak, kind of I don't really know, but no, I mean, the more I became more into my knowing who I am, I can be pretty I can come back at you kind of sharp, and I know, that's the thing, when you get to know each other in 20 years, you really know each other. I can push that button, and I can push it hard, like I know where it is, and I don't want that vindictive sound like Jesus covered under the blood. I'm trying to cover that vindictive side of me under the blood. But sometimes when you get backed in a corner, what do? You come out with your claws, and I'm like, okay, just time out, because this is not how I want to respond to you. I don't want to just do my knee-jerk reaction, because that one is not good for this relationship.
Yes.
It's not going to be good for anybody. We're going to be doing a lot of undoing, and it's hard. You can't take those words back.
Yes.
Right? And they say words don't hurt. Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. And since we know the right words to say, those words hurt even worse, So.
Yes. One of the lessons that your mom taught me was being okay, since I shut down when I'm like, ooh. So she said that when we're in this cave and we're like going through anger or going through frustration and stuff like that, and we're in this cave and the other person is trying to force us out of it to say what we're feeling or say what's on our mind and stuff like that. And like, no, let that person stay in that cage and then come out whenever you feel like you want to talk about it, but you have to like actually come out and talk about that thing. And I love that so much because I use that ever since in marriage counseling. She told us this, and so I use that every single day, especially when I get frustrated with him because we don't have any big things that we argue about. We don't have any extra baggage. We don't have any baby daddy, baby mama drama, and anything like that. So when we do go back and forth, it's just small stuff, and so it's stuff that can be worked out that night and not going to bed angry and stuff like that. So that's one of the lessons like I love that she taught me because it works for us. Currently, how do you put time and energy into communicating with your spouse, even when it's challenging? And I know that you said that your husband worked a lot. So how do you put time and energy into communicating?
I feel for us, we having 4 children, we schedule it in, whether it be texting. I can't say like, because we're kind of hit and miss in the morning. We get up really early. I mean, our morning starts at 5:30 a.m. every morning, and just the hustle and bustle. I may not get it out that, hey, I'm picking the kids up, or no, you're picking the kids up. So right now, what works for us is texting. That's how we communicate. And then, little stuff like that. If we're talking about the children, or, hey, you want to get a bite to eat or something like that.
Yeah.
We do try to spend some time now that our kiddos are old enough to, kind of manage themselves more. Get time away at least once a week, just together, the two of us, minus the kiddos. But yeah, that's helped a lot.
That's good.
We have a scheduled date every week. And sometimes the day has to change depending, but we pretty much have a stationary day. My kids are old enough to totally fend for themselves, even though they act like they're not. And so I could just see, like, see ya, fix something.
Right. Praise the Lord.
Even though they're like, you didn't feed them. There was plenty of stuff to make. So we've tried to schedule a day every week to just catch up. And we've really tried really hard. My husband has 2 phones. And so he really hates phones. He hates them, and yet he has 2 of them. And there are times when they can't just be shut off because he's in the middle of a project or something where he supervises 24/7 people, 24/7. And so that gets a little hectic, but we've tried really hard to set the phones aside and to be intentional is our word.
That's
For the last couple of years, be really intentional about how we spend our time, what we discuss, and kind of having some plans for the future, which is we're kind of on the edge of a whole nother section of life, and so kind of how that looks. And we've taken a couple of times, because he travels for work, I travel for work. We've been able to bank some days at hotels and stuff, and we've done a couple of that, If I go on a conference, sometimes he'll go with me or something like that to just kind of get away.
Yeah.
And even if it's like we're both gone and we both have to work all day, and we could just, go to the movies or hang out at night, and just be intentional about talking about the new things on the horizon and things that bother us. And our lives have changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's made me think a lot differently about some things. And so it's put a lot of strain and stress, and we both feel a little stress about, just life in general, but it also has made us really think about how we want to continue the next 20, 30 years,
How did you and your husband meet?
Well, Ken and I met at my first job up north. It was Jewel Osco grocery store. And he came through my line flirting. I was a cashier, and he asked me for my number on the receipt. And I really wanted to give it to him, but he was with his boys. And so I said no. And then I think they kind of turned around and he asked, like, you're really not going to give me your number? And I said, no. And he left. Anyway, he left. And I told the girl that I was working with that, like, oh, he was really cute. Like, he was fine. And so, anyway, for the next 4 weeks, he came back to the store every night looking for me. And some nights I saw him and some nights I didn't. And every night he would ask for my number when I saw him, and I would still tell him no. And one night, my grandparents came and picked me up. I was 16 years old, so they would, pick me up, drop me off from work. I got home, and it was late. It was like 10 o'clock, and my phone rang. The phone rang at home, and I answered it. And I was raised by my grandparents, so, the phone don't ring after like 8 o'clock. So the phone ringing was like, who's calling? And I picked up the phone, and it was him. And I'm like, hello? And he said, hi. And I was like, who is this? Like, oh, my God. And he was like, it's Ken. And I was like, how did you get my number? Like, what do you mean it's Ken?
You didn't give it to him.
I didn't give it to him, so how'd you get my number? And he said, Amina, this is the girl I work with. She gave it to him. And so, like, 5 seconds, I was like, okay, I got to call you back. Because I knew my grandma picked up the phone. Sylvia? Who is that? And I was like, okay, I got to go, bye. Yeah, and so I called him back the next day, and it was one of those, we were on the phone for 2 or 3 hours, talked all night, but yeah. And so, yeah, that's how we met.
Awesome.
High school love, yes.
So you guys have been together a long time.
We have. We've been together since I was 16 years old, but given Ken's like 4.5 years older than me. So it was the age factor of like, he's almost 20, I'm 16.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
But that was
It took me about 6 months really before my grandparents met him, because I was thinking, they're never going to let me talk to him. And he has a car. What?
so funny.
So is that what you got when your grandparents found
That
that reaction
old?
that you were thinking, about the age
definitely.
difference?
They did. My grandmother was like, where does he live? Who's his mom? Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's good parenting.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That
but
ain't your
when you're
business.
16, you're like,
I know.
oh my God, what does it matter?
You're gonna crawl under around you.
No, you can't meet his mom.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
I met my husband at church. Actually, I had met him years and years before, but I didn't really remember him because he's 6 years older than me. His brother was my age, so I knew his brother well. So his parents had joined the church, and we all hung out with his brother, but he was, stationed somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would always pray for him and send prayers for my son. And so when he got out of the military full time, he was in between the military and a job, and he came to stay with his parents for a month, and he came to church. And it was a big Women's Day service, after the women's retreat.
I miss those women's retreats.
Oh, my God. And that service was ridiculous. And so I remember he came to the altar, and he raised his hands all out like that, and everybody just took off running. And so we had gone to a concert at a church in Indianapolis, about 7 or 8 of us, and concert was terrible. And we're all sitting at this church, and we're like, "You guys want to go get something to eat?" And they were like, "Yeah." So we all kind of tipped out, and we went downtown to TGI Fridays, and we're all sitting at this table, and he's like, "You guys have been really great, and this has been great to hang out, and I just want to let you know that they're going to send me to Bosnia, and I'm leaving in a few weeks." And I went to the bathroom, and I started crying in the stall.
Oh.
And I'm like, what is wrong with you? What is going on? And I was like, what is going on? Like, I did not even understand.
Yes.
And, of course, my friend's like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm coming. Trying to get myself together. And I was like, trying to figure out what that was all about.
Mm-hmm.
And he left, and you know, they had posted his address for people to write him and stuff, because he left before the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
People were sending him stuff, and I sent him this book, 101 Things God Can't Do.
Mm-hmm.
And he just thought that was the coolest thing, and he started writing me, and we probably wrote from probably December to March, and he came home. He had a week off, and he came home in March, and that was our first date.
Oh.
And it was like, I just kind of knew I'm going to marry this guy. After that, I was just like, okay. And I was kind of casually talking to this guy and this guy, and I was just like, I called him off, and I was like, I'm not going to call you back, so I just thought you should know. Hey. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can recall.
So how did you meet Jerry?
So, Jerry and I met through a mutual friend. I lived with her in like 2011. And so that's when I was like kind of in and out of the church. And so Jared was going back and forth from Vincent's to here. And so when he came, he would always like come over and hang out. But at this time, we didn't really like each other. We had no interest, and I think he was dating somebody at the time, so we wasn't really interested in each other. But kind of fast forward, we started working at the YLC together. And so I would like pick him up, drop him off whenever he needed, wherever he was going or whatever. And so he started to really have kickbacks at his house and barbecues, and I love food. And so if it's food and it's free, I'm there.
Right.
So I got very comfortable, and Jared was nothing like the man that I usually date. He was totally different. I've never dated anybody inside the church ever in my life, and so it was very different to the point where I couldn't explain our relationship to anybody. So like people ask me questions, I couldn't explain it. I don't know. This is new. I don't know. But yeah, I got comfortable, and I got too comfortable. It was like 2014. We kind of decided to make it official. And so we kind of both got over the fact that we're from two different worlds, because that was something that, like, those conversations alone just made us kind of wanted to break up with each other. And we've been going ever since 2014. And one of the things that I had to assure, like, for myself was I have to have a good relationship with your mama. I love mamas, and I don't really have the best relationship with my mom, but I still have a relationship. And so, like, mothers are very important to me. And so the first day that I met his mom, she was so welcoming. And this was before we even got together. She was so welcoming, and I was just like, okay, I can see this happening. And so I told him, hey, if you and me and your mother did not have a good relationship, I cannot be with you, because I'm not trying to compete with anybody's mother. Okay, that is beyond my pay grade, okay? But we clicked, and I love his mom. And I said, okay, I can do this. So ever since then, we've been...
Gotta love their mamas, you know.
Yeah.
I was lucky that I knew Travis's mom before I even knew him really well.
Mm-hmm.
And she was fireball.
Mm-hmm.
She was awesome, though.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just as genuine, still is as genuine as you want to be. So I was like, and our moms were friends.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like,
So it was a
hey.
plus.
I mean, we don't have those kind of, do you hate your in-laws?
That was
I
a
don't
plus.
hate my in-laws.
Nope.
We have our parents like vacation together. We're good,
Yep.
So it's good.
Yeah. I remember talking to somebody, I don't remember who, but they were asking me about my relationship with my mother-in-law, and I was telling them all the good things, and I have absolutely nothing bad to say about my mother-in-law. And they were just like, so she don't do, like, she's not, like, overbearing. She's not trying to, like, manipulate you. I'm like, no, she's great. Like, she called me and prayed with me. That's the best thing that I can ever have in my life right now. So that changed the way that I think of relationships, being with him. So it's how do you resolve conflict?
It depends on the conflict.
It does. It really does depend on what the conflict is.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say, just being transparent. The whole, don't go to bed angry. Using bad words at one another.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the conflict.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
I think we really do try to talk it out. It really depends on what it is, but it's been a really long time since we've just had like a major blow up. I think now we tend to give each other space to just, you need to go to your closet and I need to go to mine, and just, give each other space and time, because depending on what it is, I can't force you to talk to me.
Right.
And you can't force me to pull out whatever you're trying to, you know what I mean?
Right.
So that seems to work. That seems to work for us. Just if we can't talk about it right now, let's table this and we'll come back to it. Yeah.
I think that's good. We do that sometimes. Maybe not intentionally, but sometimes it's just like, I don't have words right now. I'm just walking away. And sometimes he'll do the same thing. And, we've had some really kind of difficult situations lately, and I'm like, man, we haven't had this in a while, and so that there was a time when we would have hard conversations, and I would fear that he would leave. I never said that out loud, but I would feel that. Like, if I really express how I feel, is he going to still stay here, And it was not warranted. He never left me, But I remember when we were first married, he would just get his keys and walk out the door. When he came back, but he would just go driving. But that would terrify me on the inside. Like, he's just going to be gone.
Yeah.
And that wasn't, as far from the truth as he would never do that. But, something in me was just like, I can't really tell you how I really feel because I'm not sure how you're going to react to it. And the more I knew about him, the more that if I did something that I knew he was not going to be happy with, then I really didn't want to tell him because I already knew that was a button.
Yeah.
And then I kind of would, find myself kind of trying to get around that, which is not good at all. I don't recommend that at all. just get it out,
Yeah.
But now it's like, it's tough when you go through another season and it's, you feel like you're starting from scratch. You're not, because you've built up all these layers, but you're dealing with something completely foreign. And right now, adult children is foreign. And we don't know what to do with this. And it is very difficult.
Good. That's good.
And I had friends tell me that, but I kind of not dismiss them, but let me live my life. My kids are different, and everybody's kids are different. So I could tell you something and it may never happen, It's just like being pregnant. Everybody wants to tell you their pregnancy stories. Every pregnancy is different, So you would take take little pieces. It may or may not work, but it's kind of like that. You really can't get your arms around it until you're in it. You really don't know what to do with it until you're in it, and those emotions that you have towards your children as they're progressing into their own lives, put that into words, and you watch them fall. It's like watching them ride a bike, but then you can't pick them up.
Yeah.
That's so hard. And that is something that we are struggling with together. We're trying to figure this out, and what's the best tactic, and you got a tactic, and I got a tactic, and these tactics are different, and which one's going to work, and in the meantime, they got their own tactic that they try to work out. Right? It's not like, how do you wrap a baby up, and the baby's just saying, do something with me.
Yes.
They're like, oh, no, I got this, And so how much do you let them fall? And, and this is where communication with God comes in, right? Because we haven't really talked about that. But And unfortunately, my husband and I never really, I don't say never, we weren't super successful at this coming together and praying together.
Yes.
I don't know why. We had us think about our own prayer life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pray over here, you pray over there, and we'll get together. We'll be good. And we did that for years. We tried to pray together. We even prayed with our kids at night, but it wasn't this deep, prayer every day. And then we started doing this morning prayer, and he'd wake me up at the crack of dawn because he goes to work really early and pray in the car. That kind of worked, but not always. I wouldn't always hear the phone. I'd be asleep,
That's good.
And so we've tried to work through that, but now I see that those moments in prayer it makes it easier for me to be vulnerable what I'm thinking and what I'm really worried about.
Yes.
I'm giving it to God, but you're hearing me give it to God.
Mm-hmm.
And in those moments, you can hear what's in my heart. And if you can't hear that, maybe you assume there's nothing there. Maybe you assume that I'm thinking something totally different.
Yeah.
And those moments when you're not doing that, it makes it hard. And so communication right now is tricky. It's tricky. We're duking it, and they were in our corners, and then we're like, okay, I will back up and let you take this one, and then, if it doesn't work, then we'll regroup. Because right now we just feel like fish out of water. I really feel like that, and He loves us. God's gonna work everything out. I believe that. I really do. So God always says, why don't you trust me? This is his quote to me. He says this to me every day. Why aren't you trusting me? Oh, I feel like a toddler. I don't know. I'm so trying. I really am, And so, my husband says it, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, how do you know?
Yes.
Okay, God says this to me. Okay, God knows, but you don't know. And he's like, it always works out, and it does. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
But in a moment, when you see your child that you birthed and you love making some really stupid mistakes,
you want to do everything you
I
can
do.
to rescue.
You want to rescue,
Yes.
but you also know that it's through the trial that refines them.
Yes.
So you can't rescue them from everything. And physically, you can't. Period, because you can't keep up with them.
Right. But as mothers,
that's what we do. We're there to protect our kids. But when they get to a certain age, and they're and it's like God is saying, I loved them before you loved them. And so now you gotta let me take this. You gotta let me take the reins on this, because there's. I'm backed against the wall. I don't know where. I don't have any other recourse. I don't. I'm doing everything in my power, and at that point, you gotta let it go.
Yeah. Ooh, that's good. You just. That's really good, and I'm really, really glad that you said you mentioned communication with God, because that's very important, and prayer is very important in a relationship. And I know that with me and Jared, we don't always pray together, and we pray separately. And so there are times when we were just dating, and he would try to have like Bible study with me, and I would kind of fall asleep. And I didn't know why that was like that. And I really had to pray by myself and ask God, why am I falling asleep while he's trying to have Bible study? Like, he's actually trying really hard. But that's really something that I had to figure out along the way, because I still didn't understand then. So I know third parties can be very invested in our relationship because they care. So has there ever been a time to where someone else tried to intercede in your relationship and kind of cause confusion with communication with your husband?
I would. Okay, that's an absolute yes. For me personally, it would be family.
Yes.
Your family, your siblings, your parents, they care about you. They state their opinions about your marriage or relationship. I feel like, I feel like I just have numerous examples.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah. Yeah.
That happens all
Trying
the
to think
time.
about all
yeah,
of
like
them.
you can't just point out one. But I think it's important to say that they're just their opinions.
Mhm.
And yes, we can take heed to them, but at the end of the day, it's your relationship, it's your marriage.
Yes.
Who are you really gonna listen to?
Yes.
Yeah, I just leave it at that.
I'm kind of blessed about the family. My parents have been very careful about getting too involved with
Mhm.
our marriage like that. I mean, they my mother told me years ago that the thing with sharing things about when you're upset, sharing things about your spouse to someone else
Mhm.
is they're boiling over it and you got over it.
Mhm.
Right, you got over it, you forgave him,
Yep.
and you moved on, and this person's still holding this against your spouse, and that's not fair, right?
Mhm.
And so she was really careful. My husband might say something different, but she was really careful, I think, to try to just let's pray about it, or not ask me a lot of specific stuff, or she could tell when I was down, but then she would just not poke me for details and just let's just give it to God, or go work it out. Do you need me to watch your kids? I mean, she was just really, really good about that. I think probably where I've let things, and it's more me than him, is my kids. I know that they get, and my kids are very sensitive. Even if my husband and I we've always talked, and we've talked very passionately sometimes. We don't yell. We don't fight like that, but we can talk kind of loud. And we're very opinionated, and neither one of us will back down off of our opinions. We've even agreed to just, okay, that's yours, or this is mine. I'm not letting that go, And I remember one time we were having a probably kind of loud conversation in the car coming back from church, and our kids start crying.
No.
And they were probably 4 and 5 or something, and I don't know if in their mind that was somebody must told them that was your parents fighting could be a breakup or something. Somehow that got into they didn't know that before that.
Yeah.
But in that moment they thought we're gonna break up and there's not gonna be a mommy and daddy. And we had to pull the car over and have this long discussion with them about this is not what's going on. I have an opinion. Mommy's got an opinion, and we do this, and we're just talking through this, She gets passionate about it, and I get passionate about it, and we're not yelling at each other. And so they say we're yelling, but they don't really know what yelling is because they've never really heard it.
Yes.
They really not.
Yes.
Sometimes I'll be like, you want to hear yelling?
Let me give you an example.
Okay, because what we were doing was not yelling. You don't get it, And so they're really sensitive. And my husband gets a little frustrated because he's got a really deep, bellowing voice, and he can sound really strong and almost to a kid, It makes him, Daddy yelled at me. And so when we have disagreements, sometimes the kids are, they hear it or they hear bits and pieces of it, and they want to help somebody, usually me. They want to help mommy out. And, before I'm like, just look, leave it alone. I'm good. Or before they just hug me because they didn't know what to do, And if they see me sad, they'd hug me. Or, they see me upset, they would, go get a tissue and sit by me. But now they're like, they want to know because they're older. They want to have
this.
Yeah.
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 And I'm like, and so I have to be careful with that because then they form their opinion. And I'm over this and they're still stewing, And kids in general will alter your communication with your spouse because they are very manipulative.
They want to turn you.
They will turn whoever they can. And they're smart too. Daddy didn't give it to me, I'm gonna go to mommy, or vice versa, And they know who to tick for what,
They do.
And so they'll play you against each other quick. in a heartbeat. And my husband's like, we like shut the door. We gotta have a united front. Yes. These kids are trying to take us out. But it's true. They're so smart, and they just want what they want.
Yeah.
They just want what they want.
Yeah.
And they're gonna find a way to get it
That's
if they can. And
funny.
if you guys don't talk to each other, he'll be like, yeah, that's fine. I just told them they can't do that, Well, why did you ask me that? And your mother, and so now we'd have, did you say no?
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to kind of just work that out, because if they feed off you if you're tired.
Yes.
They know. They come when you just about to close your eyes and asking you stuff,
Yeah, I've been that kid.
And so you have to, kids will, I think, in my case, my kids are probably the worst.
Mm.
Yeah, I didn't have as much with my in-laws, thank God, or my mother and father. Or my siblings didn't get involved at all, but my kids did.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That's something that I had to learn the hard way as far as third party involvement, because I had people in my life that was my really, really close friends and my siblings that lived with me, and I told them everything in the beginning. And sometimes I cried, sometimes I was mad, and they just like, why are you still with him? And I really, like as I said before, I couldn't explain why I was still with him, but the Lord kept us together. And then when I would like go back and be with him, they always questioned that, and it was just a whole lot of headache and frustration and building up on, I'm trying to understand why I even like him in the first place type thing. So I learned not to just tell everything, but just kind of give an update, because everybody want to know, but just keeping things within our house and venting to people that I know will understand. Not in a way of getting mad at him or being angry, but just finding a balance of what can I tell my friends outside of my marriage? What can I share? Because that took me a very long time to even know what to do.
Now, that's an interesting conversation, because we really didn't talk about communication about, so when you're frustrated and you want to vent. So my husband was he was military intelligence. He don't mess around. He clandestine almost, to the point where it's like, really, he whatever is in his house stays in his house. Like, he is just very, very adamant about stuff like that. And it kind of, he didn't do this, but in my mind, I kind of pushed some of my friends away.
Yeah, me too.
And I isolated myself a little bit.
We can get you in a bubble.
Yeah, actually not for a minute, for a while. And then you get to the point where you're like, man, I don't have any friends. Like,
yes.
I mean, I have friends, but like not nobody
As
I'm really
close as
close
you
to,
were. Yeah.
And I don't even know who I can talk to this about.
Yeah.
And then you feel, and then I internalize that, because that's not good either. Because sometimes they're not understanding you. You're in some phase in life that this is just, I don't know, we're just trying to muddle through, right? And so, okay, my sister's 10 years younger. Maybe that at the time was not the best solution, I don't really want to say this to my mother, because I don't want her to look at him sideways.
Yes.
I don't really have any friends to tell this to. And so I just internalize it.
Yep.
And then I explode.
Yep.
And guess what? I end up in therapy. Thank God for therapists.
Yes.
Hello.
Because I will go. I will go.
So ladies out there, get a therapist if you need one. And I didn't go a lot, but sometimes it was just, I would get to this boiling point, and then I would just be like, okay, I just need to spill. And I mean, I spilled for a whole hour, and the lady she's writing. She's like, she's like, I can see why you want to blow up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay. So that was a lot. And she was like, yeah, like a whole page worth. And I'm like, okay. And that was good. All right. I cried until I went through half a box of Kleenex, my eyes are red, my nose is puffy, and I'm good, because I got it all out. Everything I was thinking, everything I was feeling. She didn't say hardly any word to me.
You did your own counseling.
Yes, self-care. But sometimes you need that. And sometimes there isn't a good person to talk to.
Yeah.
Who can be confidential, be neutral. There's not many neutral people out there. People that you love, you know, if you have friends that both love you, sometimes they can be neutral, sometimes not. And spouse, when you have spouses and you be friends with, if it's just you and a friend, that gets tricky. If you get spouse friends, that's even trickier.
Yes, definitely.
And then you're trying to balance everybody's personalities, and can we even go out on a double date or a vacation? But, you know, handful of people, like a pinky full.
That's right.
And so...
Yeah.
And throw kids in there. Can our kids get along and not be fighting? You know, I mean, you know, it's tricky.
Yes.
And so sometimes you need that random counselor that has no stake in anything but to do their job and make you feel better.
Yes.
Wow, they're an amazing person. And you may never see them again, or you may see them every week. But self-care, can I tell you, self-care is very important.
Yes, it is.
We don't do that enough. And I know I didn't do it probably 15 years of my marriage. I probably didn't hardly do any
it
self-care.
soon enough.
I did not.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, if you want mommy to be okay, you leave me alone. If you don't want me to blow and you want me to be a kind, loving person, just walk away. Shut the door. I need a minute. They're like, we want to go to the McGrate. Go. You don't want to go? No, I do not. You want to be home by yourself? Yes, I do.
That's necessary.
Leave me alone. Bye.
That's necessary.
I hope you go see a 3D movie that's 3 hours long. Bye-bye. Go get some ice cream afterwards.
By the time
need
you
money?
get back,
Oh, you
I'm
need
nice.
Yeah.
Yes. And I know that's hard to do with smaller kids, but finding that time to be by yourself and really thinking about what you're going through and trying to figure out, like, how can I move on from this is very, very necessary. Very.
Yeah. And I like I said, I had kids so fast, I didn't really have time to discover myself. And I had postpartum with my second child, and I just muddled through.
Yeah.
And I didn't handle it well. I would have handled it differently now, but I didn't know. I didn't know. And I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to handle it. And I did a lot of, stuff that is sad, that I feel is sad now.
Yeah.
Because my kids are like, yeah, I remember coming home and just eating cereal, or I didn't know what to eat because you just went to bed, you know. And I'm like, I don't even remember that. I don't remember that. And that makes me sad, you know, because I feel like there was a part of that time that my kids didn't see me. They didn't really benefit from a mom there, you know. I was there, but not there.
I hate to end the conversation on this note, but we are at the end of this episode. Kizmin and Sylvia, thank you guys so much for being here. I really, really, really appreciate it. Just you being honest and you being transparent about your marriages. To our listeners, thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below. We love feedback. Let us know what you think of this episode. Let us know how you communicate in your marriages. Let's start a conversation. So, until next time.